The thing about Stock Aitken and Waterman is they're very high street, they're very end of the pier. You know, everything they do is as common as muck, really. I guess buying into the fresh-faced girl from Sunshine, Australia was so high street that if there was even an ounce of possibility that there could have been a slightly upwardly mobile Kylie at that time, you know, they completely rinsed that thought away and just sold her basically as kind of pop fish and chips.
It was pure hit factory stuff, fun music that would appeal equally to sort of 5-year-olds and, you know, 60-year-olds. And her image kind of matched the music, really. It was light-hearted, frothy pop.
Kylie's profile was rising fast, and she was quickly assigned a manager by the name of Terry Blamey. Blamey's press tactics were simple but effective. When Kylie first arrived in the UK from Australia, she was packed at the airport looking a dishevelled mess. The next day, Kylie was torn apart by the tabloids for her lack of polish as a burgeoning pop star. Blamey immediately embargoed all interviews until the incident had been forgotten, teaching her an important lesson in media management and the unforgiving nature of the British press.
Terry Blamey, as Kylie's manager, has been for donkey's years, right from the very start in Melbourne. He's always been in her corner, and he controls the image and how she presents herself to the world with a firm hand.
She's been in the public eye since she was, what, 17, 16, something like that, and I think she treats every encounter with the press, for instance, like it's a learning process.
So when this happened at Heathrow, they did the smart thing. They said, OK, we're going to make sure you get photographed. We'll play their game. We'll make sure, if they want pictures of you, we'll make sure they're the pictures that we want as well. And they kind of do deals, don't they? That's how it works. They say, if you want a picture of me, can you wait 10 minutes? You'll get the picture.
Kylie Minogue understands that's a fair deal. If we cross over the edge, you know, Kylie's got a simple answer for us. You won't get a picture.
The way Kylie dealt with the media changed gear when she met an unlikely admirer who had been pursuing her as she toured Japan in 1989. The lead singer of rock group In Excess, Michael Hutchence's rebellious hedonism was the antithesis to Kylie's bubblegum pop. It wasn't long before Kylie's curiosity got the better of her, and she ditched the blonde boy next door for Michael's sultry charms.
She was the soap bubble, literally. She was clean and white and pure and virginal. And that doesn't get you very far in sort of terms of pop or any kind of longevity. She needed something else to happen.
Sooner or later something's going to give, unless you're Cliff Richard or some kind of automatron. And eventually you're either going to get really into crack or you're going to shag an Australian rocker in leather trousers.
There had to be some point along the way where, metaphorically, she lost her virginity, if you like. She became something else. She became darker. The character became more complicated. So it was inevitable in a way that along the way she would meet some kind of dark prince that would roughen her up.
She looked like a woman who was kind of having sex for the first time and, you know, really kind of enjoying thinking about herself as a bit of a sexy vamp type creature. And really, she didn't have to say anything about it because it was kind of written all over her face.
Kylie was enjoying a new lease of life away from the formulaic manufacturing imposed on her by Stock, Aitken and Waterman. She revelled in the public's reaction to her romance, and in 1990 pushed things even further when she arrived at the Delinquents premiere, sporting a drastic new look. It was the first time she had consciously manipulated her own image to get the public's attention. It
was her 14-year-old phase. Everybody goes through that, the kind of bratty teenage thing, and maybe she went through it about 5 years after everybody else because she'd been in a very kind of controlled environment. And you know, like, if your whole image is of being the girl next door, you must be dying to do something a bit raunchier. So she ends up going out with Michael Hutchence.
Without a doubt, whoever was in control of Kylie herself, her assistants, would have exploited that moment to turn her into a much more grown-up figure, if you like.
The whole good girl turn bad thing is something that's worked in pop music for time immemorial and always will, and Kylie is one of the few people who's managed to do it on a cyclical basis. She's gone good girl then bad girl then good girl and bad girl, and the public keep lapping it up and forgetting that she's done the same stunt a million times.
Michael Hutchence taught Kylie how to play the fame game and reminded her that she should be in control of her own image. With this in mind, and free from the restrictions that had governed her relationship with Jason, Kylie delighted in being candid with the press about her sex, drugs and rock and roll lifestyle.
She slipped up a couple of times with the press, and there were stories of her drug taking and, you know, knowing what one knows now about Michael Hutchence, you can only imagine the sort of things that she was up to.
There was some decadence that went on, but no more than anyone else was doing at that period of time. But just because it was Kylie, it seemed to be more interesting to people.
Perhaps she wasn't being that naive, perhaps she kind of leaked it accidentally on purpose because it just linked in with her, you know, carefully stage managed, good girl going bad spell.
Kylie and Michael's relationship suffered under demanding tour schedules and fizzled out towards the end of 1991 after Michael was seen out with Danish supermodel Helena Christensen. Kylie was suddenly left very much on her own. Her contract with Stock Aitken and Waterman had not been renewed, and her audience had grown up and moved on. Kylie was finally free, but how would she deal with being left to her own devices?
I don't think Kylie necessarily lost her identity when she split up with Michael, but I think she was given sort of this newfound freedom to discover what her identity was.
Her image became a lot more kind of on the edge, a lot more fashionable, a lot less mainstream, and it actually wasn't a big success commercially because of all of those things.
I think working with the Manics, I think there was a moment where one of her songs didn't even get into the charts. This would have been very, very scary for someone like Kylie. She had to sacrifice one kind of audience in order to get the kind of integrity that would enable to be around for a long time.
Considering she was singing songs about kind of death and roses with, you know, relatively unknown characters like Nick Cave, she actually did quite well. So, you know, I think now we can kind of look back on that and see that the Kylie that then transpired couldn't really have happened without that deconstruction phase.
I don't look at it as reinvention. It's just a change. It's progression. It's growing older and learning about myself. I've got, you know, hopefully a long time ahead of me to keep learning about myself and what I think of the world and how I fit in.
During the 5 years she was with Deconstruction Records, Confide in Me was Kylie's only top 10 hit. And in 1996, for the first time in 8 years, she released no records. Her profile had sunk to an all-time low, and Kylie had all but killed off her pop persona. It wasn't until a meeting with Parlophone bosses in 1999 that a possible rebirth for Kylie looked set to happen.
Putting a go with Parlophone, which is an extraordinarily sophisticated pop machine, sort of elevated Kylie to the level she should be at. You know, working with very clever Imagineers, if you like, pop fantasists, rather than the slightly low level, either the grubby level or the slightly nerdy level at Deconstruction.
The reinvention of Kylie was really just a throwback to her old image, but a much raunchier one.
She knew the way to come back was by making records that were about pleasure. Her pleasure and therefore everyone else's pleasure. They were about happiness and delight. But they now had a darker shadow to them. There was something, they weren't silly and frivolous and end of the pier and High Street because she'd gone somewhere else.
What she did when she signed to Parlophone was really take advantage of her looks, and there's that famous shot of her in the gold hot pants that, you know, you can now see her in Madame Tussauds. It became iconic, and she played on her best asset, her bum, and that's, for years, was what she was famous for, was the best bum in show business.
Instrumental in reinventing Kylie was her stylist and confidant William Baker. Baker had been responsible for putting Kylie in the gold hot pants, and his creations were inspired by iconic female images from different eras. He initially modelled Kylie on the pin-up girls of the 1940s and taught her how to pose, arching her back and contorting her body to show off her perfectly proportioned curves.
You have to give a lot of credit to William Baker, who's been Kylie's stylist on and off for the duration of her career, and what William Baker has this incredible talent of doing is tapping into trends and creating these iconic images. And one of the reasons that Kylie has been so successful is these really, really powerful images.
When you talk to William Baker, he's kind of defensive about Kylie. He gives the impression of knowing her better than most people. He always kind of hints at the hidden depths of Kylie. And I think he feels it's his job to not just be a stylist to her, but to kind of put across the various images and the sides of her personality that he's had access to that perhaps the rest of the world haven't.
William and Kylie, he calls her Minnie and she calls him Willie. So that says it all, doesn't it, really?
William Baker had discovered Kylie's best asset, and her her derriere whipped the tabloids into a frenzy.
You cannot do an interview about Kylie without mentioning those gold hot pants spinning around. Girl or guy, you're just glued to the screen. I remember when it came out. And apparently her stylist picked them up for 50p in some thrift store.
The slogan would have been, Kylie, have you forgotten how hot she is? You know, that's what that video screamed out. It was a brilliant single. It was, you know, it wasn't quite the sort of edgy dance music she'd experimented with a few years previously. It was much more sort of brilliant, straight ahead disco music.
I worked on the Sun newspaper at the time that the gold bottom arrived, and we dedicated pages and pages of newspaper to the gold hot pants and Kylie's bottom.
There were a lot of rumours that it was Botox, you know, but you know, as I've said before, she, you know, 5'2", you know, there's not much gravity left for things to drop, and she kind of became a sex symbol.